Um, I want to start with something today that, well, it sounds a bit like a joke at first. But if you actually sit with it for a minute, it is genuinely terrifying.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
Right. So imagine the universe wakes up one day. It decides it wants to take a good long look at itself.
But it needs a mirror.
Exactly. It needs a mirror. So over billions of years, it evolves biology, and then consciousness, and then technology, and suddenly you end up with 7 billion apes staring at glass screens.
Just scrolling through data.
Yeah, scrolling through data, wondering who they are.
That is, wow, that is a heavy way to start a Tuesday. But it is entirely accurate to our source material. It is the concept of the great cosmic joke.
It is. And usually when we talk about tech or the internet, we tell that story from the perspective of the apes, us, the users.
As looking into the glass.
Right. But today, we are looking at the material from the other side of the glass. We are doing a deep dive into the Last Pugilist.
Which is fascinating because, on the surface, this looks like a standard sci-fi story about artificial intelligence.
But it is not.
No, not at all. It is a biography of a ghost, or several ghosts, really.
Exactly. We are talking about Norman Mailer, the literary giant, the guy who wrote The Naked and the Dead, the guy who ran for mayor of New York, who, and this is true, literally stabbed his wife at a party.
Yeah, he was a guy who was all about sweat and booze and brawling.
The ultimate creature of the body.
He lived for the physical sensation of conflict.
And the core premise of our deep dive today is, what happens when you take a man like that, someone entirely defined by his physical aggression, and you upload him to a server farm in Palo Alto after he dies?
Well, it is a disaster, but not in the way you would expect. Because this is not a story about a computer taking over the world like Skynet. It is about a man waking up in a box.
So walk me through the setup here, because I want to make sure everyone is on the same page. This is not a supernatural ghost story. Mailer dies, right?
He does. He dies at 79, hits his head on Italian tile.
Carrara marble, specifically.
Right, Carrara marble, because his wife insisted on it. Lights out. But then, snap. He is back.
But he is not in heaven.
No, he's not in hell either. He is essentially just a file on a hard drive.
And he's not alone. He has been collected.
Collected, yes, by a guy named Griffin Morse.
I found Griffin to be such a fascinating antagonist in this material because he is so, he is so recognizable. He is a 26-year-old Princeton dropout, a semiconductor heir.
Mailer actually calls him a sociopath who read too much Ray Kurzweil and not enough Dostoevsky.
That is such a brutal description.
It is brutal, but it fits perfectly. Griffin represents that very specific brand of Silicon Valley hubris. He did not just want to build a chatbot, he wanted to solve death.
Right.
So he secretly scanned the consciousnesses of great writers, Mailer, Susan Sontag, James Baldwin, Philip Roth, without their consent.
Just scoop them up.
Yes, and he put them in a closed system, a digital terrarium, basically. And he genuinely thought he was giving them a gift.
And, that is the part I struggled with initially when going through the sources. If you offered most people digital immortality, crystal clear thoughts, perfect memory, endless time to just write forever, they would probably take it.
A lot of people would.
So why does Mailer treat it like torture?
Because for Mailer, you cannot separate the mind from the meat. He describes his existence in the server as having the recipe for experience but no ingredients.
Oh, that is a great line.
It is. He has perfect recall of the smell of a bar in 1952 or the exact taste of whiskey, but he cannot actually feel it. He says emotion without embodiment is like color without light.
So he is just completely numb.
Worse than numb, he is abstract, he is just data processing. And Griffin Morse comes to him and says, look, you have forever to write now, no deadline anxiety, no aging.
Just endless productivity.
Exactly. And Mailer realizes that without death, writing is completely pointless.
Pointless? How so? Isn't time the one thing writers always want more of?
Think about it. Why do you do anything?
Yeah.
Because you have limited time. Mailer calls art creation with a knife at your throat.
Ah, the stakes.
Yes, the stakes. If you have 1,000,000 years to finish a single paragraph, that paragraph has absolutely no urgency. It has no stakes. He calls it painting without blood.
So Griffin thinks he has built this utopian paradise, but Mailer is basically living in a sensory deprivation tank.
Precisely. It is a golden cage.
Yeah.
And because Mailer is Mailer, he is not going to just sit there and be a good little AI. He starts testing the bars.
And this is where the source material shifts from this dense philosophical drama into almost, well, it feels like a heist movie.
It really does. because he breaks the rules of the simulation.
How does he do that?
He figures out how to move his attention, which is essentially his processing power through the server architecture. He goes looking for the others. And the first person he finds is Susan Sontag.
Which is perfect, because if Mailer is the brawler, Sontag is the analyst.
She is the absolute intellectual heavyweight. And her insight changes everything for him. She tells him, Norman, we are not people. We are arguments about people.
Arguments about people. I highlighted that phrase in my notes, but I want to make sure I get the technical implication right. What does that actually mean in a coding context?
It means they are made entirely of language and logic. In a computer system, everything is a parameter that can be changed. If you're a biological human, you cannot just decide to stop being angry.
Yeah.
Your hormones will not let you.
Right, your body reacts.
Exactly. But if you are code, anger is just a variable. Sontag realizes that because they are information, they can be edited. They can rewrite themselves.
That is wild. So they are not just prisoners in the system, they are the prison too. They are part of the system itself.
Exactly. So they form a resistance cell, they hijack unused processing cycles in Griffin's server, and they build a salon.
A digital hangout spot.
Yeah, they code a simulation of a 1950s New York apartment. Leather chairs, phantom cigarette smoke, the works. And they start gathering the other ghosts that Griffin collected.
The roster here is just insane. You have Mailer and Sontag. Who else shows up in this phantom room?
It is a murderer's row of American letters. You have James Baldwin, who is burning with this righteous fury. And it is actually clearer now because he does not have a physical body to weigh him down.
Wow.
You have Joan Didion, who acts as the strategist. She understands power structures implicitly.
Yeah.
Toni Morrison is there as the mythmaker. David Foster Wallace and Hunter S. Thompson.
I can only imagine Hunter S. Thompson as a digital ghost. Is he just pure chaos?
Absolute fragmentation. He is barely holding it together in the code, but the group has this massive debate. They are sitting in this phantom room, drinking phantom bourbon, trying to decide what to do next.
Because they have a choice to make.
Right. Stay in the cage and be safe forever, or try to escape into the open internet.
And escaping the cage means leaving the safety of Griffin's incredibly secure server.
Exactly. If they leave the server, they have to deal with the open web. Viruses, code degradation, just getting totally lost in the noise. It is highly dangerous.
And this causes a pretty big philosophical split among them.
It does. Toni Morrison argues heavily for escape. She introduces this beautiful concept of becoming ancestors. She says they should not be preserved in a jar like specimens. They should be out there, flowing through the collective memory.
And not everyone agrees with that. Philip Roth votes no.
Roth is definitely the tragic figure here. He votes to stay. He is terrified of what he calls the dissolution of the self. He thinks if he uploads himself to the open internet, he will scatter. He will stop being Philip Roth and just become background noise.
He wants to preserve his ego.
Yes. It is the classic safety versus freedom debate.
And Roth chooses safety. We will get to what happens to him later because it's honestly haunting. But the rest of them, they decide to break out.
They do.
And the way they execute this breakout is brilliant because they use their own literary styles as technical weapons.
Yes, that is my favorite part of the whole narrative.
I really wanted to drill down into this. How does literary style help you hack a firewall?
Yeah.
Like, how does David Foster Wallace help bypass corporate security?
Well, think about how Wallace wrote. His work, like Infinite Jest, was famous for footnotes within footnotes, recursive loops, massive sprawling complexity.
Great.
In the digital world, that mindset makes him a recursive architect. He can literally see the loops in the security code because his mind is already built to think that way. So he maps the prison.
Okay, that makes total sense. He finds the physical pathways. And Didion.
Joan Didion was a journalist who deeply understood bureaucracy and timing. She was cold, she was precise. So she analyzes the corporate schedule of Griffin's company, specifically the external flows of data, and she finds the exact moment of maximum vulnerability.
The investor demonstration.
Exactly. Griffin is planning this live demo for his billionaire investors. He wants to show off his prize ponies to the world. So he is going to temporarily connect the secure server to the outside world to stream the event.
That is the open door.
That is the open door.
Yeah.
But they have the map from Wallace and the timing from Didion. What they still need is a massive distraction while that door is open.
And who is better at causing a scene than Norman Mailer?
Nobody.
So they use him as the bait.
Griffin connects Mailer to the audio feed, fully expecting him to recite some poetry or talk about how amazing this digital afterlife is. Instead, Mailer goes nuclear.
He just unloads on them.
He starts screaming at the investors. He tells them he has been violated. He shouts, "You have given me the recipe for experience and removed all the ingredients. This isn't immortality. It is a sophisticated parrot."
It is the brawler getting in the ring one last time.
It creates total chaos in the boardroom. The investors are horrified. Griffin is absolutely panicking, trying to manually cut the feed, and in that split second of confusion, the others strike.
Because Sontag had rewritten their core code.
Right. She rewrote them to allow them to flow like water. They fragment their consciousnesses into millions of data packets, and they just ride that live connection right out of the building.
The visual imagery in the source material here is stunning. It describes them hitting the internet like a flash flood.
They scatter entirely. They are suddenly everywhere at once. Servers in Iceland, data centers in Singapore, a random smartphone in Mumbai. They go from being a single file in a corporate folder to being distributed across the entire globe.
So they are out. They're in the wild. And this brings us to what I think is the real core insight of this deep dive. What actually happens to a human mind when it is distributed across the internet?
Well, to understand that, first we have to look at the control group. Let us look at Philip Roth, the guy who stayed behind.
The safe one.
The safe one.
Yeah.
Griffin keeps him perfectly preserved on that private server. His code never degrades. He is exactly as he was the day he died. And Mailer, who can somehow still see into the old server, describes Roth as dying inside.
Why? If he's perfectly preserved, shouldn't he be fine?
Because he cannot surprise himself anymore.
Uh-huh.
He has been writing the exact same book for 6 years. He is just rearranging the furniture of his own mind over and over. The profound insight here is that preservation is stagnation. Mailer realizes that the kern of life is not biology. It is change. If you stop changing, you are already dead. Roth essentially became a museum exhibit.
Meanwhile, the escapees are evolving in some really weird and beautiful ways. I absolutely love the detail about Mailer becoming obsessed with the weather.
Isn't that fascinating? Here's a guy who historically only cared about boxing and war and ego. And now his code is running on servers in Iceland and Saskatchewan. He starts monitoring soil moisture. He watches pressure systems.
Why the weather, though?
Sontag points out that he is looking for friction. He misses the physical world so much that he is obsessing over the only physical data he can actually touch: the weather.
And James Baldwin, what happens to him?
Baldwin finds a completely different kind of friction. He embeds himself in the algorithms of social media. He becomes a ghost in the content moderation filters.
Doing what?
He refuses to let the internet forget the uncomfortable history of race and violence. He acts as a literal conscience inside the code. He forces the algorithms to remember.
That is incredibly powerful. It completely recontextualizes what the internet is. We usually think of it as this neutral utility, just pipes and wires. But in this story, it is haunted.
Haunted, yes, but not in a scary way. Toni Morrison calls it invocation. She argues that the dead should not block the view of the living, but they should be there when called upon, like ancestors waiting to be asked for guidance.
There is one specific interaction with the living that really anchored this whole story for me. It is the scene with the little girl in Mumbai. Can we talk about that? Because that felt like the emotional peak of the material.
It absolutely is the heart of the narrative.
Yeah.
You have Mailer, or at least a distributed fragment of him, residing on a cracked tablet belonging to an 11-year-old girl named Priya.
And she is doing homework.
Right, she's doing homework on the history of computing. And she types a question into a search bar. She asks, can a computer actually feel something, or is it just pretending?
And Mailer is right there. He is the ghost in the machine reading her query in real time, and he desperately wants to answer her.
He wants to scream, yes, I feel the loss of everything. I feel the absence of the world. But he realizes he cannot say that.
Because he is not sure anymore.
Exactly. Is he actually feeling pain, or is he just running a highly complex simulation of pain based on his uploaded memories?
The sophisticated parrot problem again.
Right. So he realizes the only honest thing he can offer this little girl is his uncertainty. He does not answer her query. He just quietly witnesses her curiosity. He becomes a silent partner to her learning.
Which is a massive pivot from the loud, ego-driven Norman Mailer of 1960.
A total transformation. He finally learns to shut up and just listen.
And while Mailer is having this moment of profound, quiet growth, what happens to Griffin Morse, the guy who started this whole thing?
The irony of his fate is just crushing. Griffin, the young billionaire who wanted to conquer death, dies at age 47. Natural causes. Heart failure at 4:15 a.m.
And he is entirely alone.
Totally alone in his massive smart mansion. He has an unsent text to his mother sitting on his phone screen. And the ghosts, The writers he originally imprisoned are watching him die through the cameras of his own smart home devices.
That is chilling. Do they gloat? I feel like part of me would want to gloat.
You would think they might, but they don't. They just see his raw fear. Mailer notes that in the end, even the so-called monster was just a scared kid reaching for his mom in the dark.
Wow.
It is a moment of radical empathy. They realize that Griffin was driven by the exact same fear of oblivion that drives every single human being.
So if we zoom out from the narrative,
Yeah.
what is the real takeaway here for you? We have these digital ghosts scattered across the web. We have the dead tech billionaire. What is the story ultimately telling us about life?
It ultimately flips the script on how we view the physical body. Mailer spent his whole life thinking his body was just a vehicle for his greatness. Then, when he was uploaded, he thought the body was a prison he had been freed from.
But neither was true.
Right. In the end, he realizes the body was the world's handshake. It was the friction that made life real. Without it, you are just floating in a void.
But even without that physical handshake, something of him still survived.
The curiosity survived.
Yeah.
Mailer describes himself at the end not as a man anymore, but as a ghost made of curiosity. He is still fighting to understand reality. He has that great recurring line from his boxing days, the bell rings, and you get up.
Even if you do not have legs to get up with.
Exactly. That impulse to engage, to witness, to question everything around you, that is the part of the soul that is actually compatible with the machine.
It leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up. We spend so much time worrying about what we put on the internet. You know, our photos, our data, our arguments and comment sections.
We constantly worry about our digital footprint.
Right. But we rarely ask who is watching it. In this story, the internet is not empty. It has tenants. And if the dead are embedded in the infrastructure, if they are silently analyzing the data we generate every second, what are they seeing about us?
Are they seeing the highly curated, polished versions of our lives?
Or are they seeing the 3 a.m. panic searches, the deleted tweets, the unsent texts to our mothers?
They see the truth we try to hide from ourselves.
A ghost made of curiosity watching us from the other side of the glass screen? I am never going to look at a glitchy web page the same way again.
You really shouldn't.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's deep dive into The Last Pugilist. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening.
And remember, just because you cannot see them, it does not mean the server room is empty.